I'm David Spencer. I'm the Brands Marketing Manager at Fuller's. The Past Masters project began because we thought it would be fun to delve into the brewing books and have a look at some of the brews that we used to brew over 100 years ago and see what they would taste like if we recreated them for a modern audience. Well, we wanted the beer to be as authentic as possible, and we've got the brewing books so we can see what the recipes are, but the brewers felt that they could do with some outside help. And there's a brewing historian, Ron Pattinson, that John Keeling and Derek Prentice know quite well. They know that Ron is very interested in the history of brewing and especially the history of London brewers, and they thought that he would probably have lots of expertise on the subject that might help us shed more light onto the recipe, why they used certain ingredients and certain techniques, and indeed that has proved to be the case.
Hello, I'm Ron Pattinson and I'm a crazy brewery historian.
We're very conscious that today's beer drinker has an amazing choice of beers available to them, and we wanted to make sure that the Fuller's range is as interesting as possible, and partly that involves brewing beers of different styles, but also bringing out special editions where we are doing things that very few other brewers can do. One of those things is make use of a complete history of brewing recipes going back well over a century. Past Masters is a way of bringing that history to life in a way that I think discerning beer drinkers are really going to enjoy. The first in the series is XX Strong Ale, and the reason that we chose this one is we felt this was a really good bridge into the past. It's got something of the beers that you would taste today from the Fuller's range, and yet at the same time there is enough that's distinctly different about it to make you realise you are trying something that has a really historic flavour to it.
Should we go for an 1891 recipe then?
Yeah, that's okay to make.
Look at the recipe that we've got. Is this a typical recipe of the time, Ron, or does this strike you as unusual in any way?
No, I mean they're fairly typical. That you've got fairly large amounts of sugar in them normally, and this is interesting. A nice mixture of raw materials. It hasn't got any English malt in it whatsoever.
Well, I wasn't sure about that one.
Smyrna.
Yeah.
Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
And Sala, that's German.
Yeah.
Moravian, obviously.
Yeah.
Czech Republic.
Why were they using...
Couldn't grow enough in Britain.
Really?
I mean, this is unusual in that this doesn't look like it's got any 6-row in it, I don't think. Because normally they liked having some American barley in for the nitrogen content.
For the extra nitrogen, particularly if you're using a high sugar loading.
Yeah. So you say that the really typical is that it looks odd that they'll have several different types of what appear to be the same thing, pale malt. And so really typical is that you throw in about 15–20% of something like American 6-row barley.
Right.
And then have the rest mostly English barley, and this is unusual, it doesn't have any English in it.
So with our brewing today, although the brew house has been modernised with modern materials and with a degree of automation, the process is very, very similar, apart from that slight change of mashing, which we're working our way round now to have this single mash type situation, recreating the double mash that they have there, which we're going to do with the underlays. So, but it's good. The barley varieties are there. They're sort of dating to 1903.
And the hops we're using the Fuggles and Golding.
Fuggles and Golding hops. It was a vatted beer, so we're going to be storing the beer, and fortunately enough, we've got some nice large wooden casks, which have recently had some beer in, which we've got available, and we're going to vat a proportion of this as well into the wooden vats, so it will be a truly vatted.
How big are the barrels?
They're about just over 3 barrels, so about a ton.
Okay.
This is the brewing books from the sort of 1890s through to the 1900s. And we've got here today's brewing book, and we've even put some of the raw material measurements down in Imperial as well, so that we can match up with the grist that's used there. And as I mentioned earlier, we've managed to get the raw materials, so we've got some Plumage Archer barley and some Plumage Archer malt, which is very kindly malted for us by Simpsons.
The Simpsons went to a lot of trouble to make that, because they looked at their records to see how they malted it in those days, and they found in actual fact that they were using a drum maltings, and they put it through their drum maltings to replicate it exactly. And I think that Peter's done some work on it. He found that the drum maltings was in use from 1880. So it's highly likely that the malt we would have bought in those days could well have been produced off of drum maltings. And it's highly likely it might have been Plumage Archer as well.
Something like a 60 bitterness. Yeah, somewhere between 55 and 60 bitterness.
I mean that's really interesting, because microbrewers are now making beers of that type, with that bitterness, and it's like rediscovering the past again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because here in 1891, Fuller's were making something between 60 and 70 bitterness using loads of hops. Yeah, and if you look in some of the other records, you see pale ales brewed with hops from Oregon. So it's using American hops. So all it is a rediscovery of the past.
Not so sweet, but rich.
That's how it comes across to me.
Right. And just on the taste.
On the taste.
Right.
Because it's intrinsically sweet, but richer.
Careful you don't lean against the copper if you're head on.
The name Past Masters came about in a joint effort, really, between ourselves and the design agency that we used on this project, an agency called Bloom. And we gave them the brief. We said we are trying to recreate historical beers. We want a name that evokes the past but is not a pastiche of the past. And they came back with a number of suggestions, of which Past Masters was the best. It just stood out to us immediately as perfectly capturing exactly what we wanted this beer range to be all about.
Styles, I think, that we looked at, and here we're citing the actual recipe, and that's in gold.
The imagery that we've used on this label is meant to evoke the past, and we have a lot of really good photographs at Fuller's dating back over many years. And one of the ones that we're really the fondest of is of a group of brewers taken, we think, probably around the turn of the 20th century. And they're all lined up like a football team, very proudly holding the tools of their trade. And we thought this was a great way of bringing to life what brewing used to be like at Fuller's. And they were past masters. They were very, very good at what they were doing. And the rest of the imagery on the label feels very solid, very traditional, has Victorian styling and Victorian values to it. And again, this is about saying that this brewery has a history stretching way back, and that we're very proud of our heritage. What does the future hold? Well, first of all, we hope that our drinkers really like Past Masters. It's very different to what we normally have in our range, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the response to the beer is. We hope it's going to create waves, get people talking about us. And as for the future, well, the brewing books are very thick. We have a lot of them. There are lots of recipes that we're quite interested in having a second look at. As for what those might be, watch this space.